Just a few days.
So we are at Fula, which is in the Shetlands. Lindblad Expeditions has never been here before, so that makes it really exciting. It is also a very small community. Our tour guide is the grandmother or great aunt of all of the 5 school children on the island. One of the biggest things I've learned on this trip is that there are people living in every corner of the world. We are visiting islands that are very isolated. Some of these islanders describe where they are as the edge of the world. And so that is really interesting for my students who live in a small rural town high up in the Rocky Mountains to know that there are other people living in isolated communities. And while these communities are vastly different from each other, some of the experiences are similar. And coming here just gives me inspiration and renewed energy to teach. It gives me validation that I'm headed in the right direction and that I'm helping these students become really the generation that we need to help make the earth a better place.
And it's somewhat of you feel a little bit of responsibility to take this information back and to share it, because we're, you know, as the first National Geographic Lindblad expedition to stop here, you have a responsibility to take this information back and to make sure it's shared correctly and appropriately.
Which means we're also the first Grosvenor Teacher Fellows to have ever been here before. So we are...
I hadn't really thought of it that way,
Grosvenor Teacher Fellow pioneers here at Fula.
One of the neatest places that you get to visit in Scotland is Staffa. It's this remote, wildly untamed island that nobody lives on. And you can actually climb to the top of Staffa. Once you get to the top, there are these untouched trails and the grass is just swaying in the breeze. You can walk around, take wonderful photos, or you can climb down to the bottom of Staffa and actually walk into Fingal's Cave. The other thing that we get to do, which is really exclusive, is actually get on a Zodiac, take the Zodiac into Fingal's Cave, and you can actually go through Fingal's Cave on a Zodiac, take some great photos, listen to the acoustics in the cave. It's just an amazing experience. Not to mention the puffins that you're likely to see if you're there at sunset. It's the most ethereal, beautiful experience that you'll have.
My name is Jeff Morrison. I'm the National Geographic photographer on board the Great Britain and Irish Isles. We are today in Fair Isle. It's a stunning landscape full of lots of seabird life. Right now we're along the cliffs here photographing puffins. This is beautiful. Oh, got some wings fluttering. Fantastic. When I approach photographing puffins or any kind of animal, I'm thinking about capturing behavior, thinking about making some nice portraits of them, and then also getting a sense of place, kind of pulling back, showing the scene, the setting where they reside. It's pretty amazing. You don't typically see puffins along the mainland, and so you tend to have to come out to these remote islands to get large bird colonies. And so this is a really spectacular place. It's really tough to get to this place. It's very remote. Because of that, you know, the wildlife tends to thrive in these locations. I love puffins. I love photographing them. They're very charismatic, beautiful birds. This is a stunning location, and we are just fortunate to have a lot of action with seabird life right now, including all these puffins that are coming in.
It's great. We have a batch of 5 over there, and there's one about 4 feet away that comes out of this hole. He's putting a nest in there right now. We've got a pretty good shot.
I think they're great.
I don't know who does their makeup though. Those eyes are just gorgeous.
This afternoon we are visiting St Kilda, remote islands off the western shore of Scotland. Very difficult to get to normally, but the weather has cooperated. We could get ashore in the Zodiacs and it's fantastic.
What a privilege it is to come to somewhere like St Kilda. Not many people can come here, and it's not a spooky place actually, it's a very beautiful place.
This is one of the black houses that the inhabitants of St Kilda lived in for centuries. Very good dwelling for them. It's got a gable end with no windows in it. It's back to the Atlantic gales, but this was quite a cosy dwelling for the St Kildans. Then in 1860, the Kildans had ocean views. The Laird, Lord MacLeod of Dunvegan on the Isle of Skye, built a row of cottages with great big sash windows, lovely views of the ocean, terribly uncomfortable. They were drafty, they were cold, and they were damp.
They didn't realize that the winds were very fierce here and the roofs blew off. So as a result, then they had to come along and work out a technique of keeping the roof on. And this obviously is their solution.
The last two generations were difficult for the people of St Kilda. They'd begun to make contact with the outside world. Cruise ships started to visit. They went from being a subsistence economy to a money economy. With the money they were buying tinned food. They didn't have to hunt in the usual way and for seabirds. They started accepting money to have their photos taken. People heard about the outside world. There was a little group of St Kildas who emigrated to Australia for a better life, and that weakened the community. By 1930, after an influenza epidemic with an elderly population and a declining population, they simply asked the government if they could evacuate the island, and that's what happened.
We're on the island of Mousa in the Shetland Islands, and the structure we are visiting now is called a broch. And a broch is a really incredible building. This particular one dates back to about 100 BC, and it was built by a Celtic, I suppose, a lord or a chieftain. In effect, it's a single protected family farmstead, but they are a remarkable structure. You don't find anything like them outside Western Scotland. There's about 570 in total, but this is regarded as the best example of it in the Shetlands. It's almost 44 foot high. The walls are about 15 foot in thickness. It's a remarkable structure. And when you walk inside, you're literally walking into what was the living quarters of these people, you know, over maybe 2,000 years ago. So it's amazing that it's still standing. There is very little that we have built in the last maybe 50 or 60 years that's going to survive, you know, even a couple of hundred years. We don't build to last, but these guys did build to last. So when I walk in here, I'm looking at stones that were placed in these configurations here over 2,000 years ago. This is one of their homes. So for me to come along here and stand in that space, I'm literally in their living room with them.